in their heads of a game that looks like that, but as to how you achieve it and still maintain AAA, production value, that's the big question right now, I think.
Yeah. Well, one of the games, and this is going to sound pretty silly, but one of the games that I really want more of, like just crazy style, is I want another game that's like Deadly Premonition. I want something just off the fucking wall, just doesn't understand how crazy it is.
Why is that?
Because like when I was playing Deadly Premonition at the start, I was like, okay, this is just bad. And I was slowly going through it, and then it started getting into weird details, like find this key with the squirrel on it, and then you went and found a key with a squirrel on it, and you came back, it's like that's not the right type of squirrel. You have to get a different breed of squirrel, and it's just like this crazy stuff you don't think about, which is they ask you for these objectives that are pretty broad, but then they want you to specify. I don't know. It hurt my head, but also made me think, and it was just really fun. I just love that
Hmm.
game.
Yeah. I've got a couple. I actually sadly never finished it. I only got about halfway through it.
I couldn't finish it either because it was just like, what the fuck? $400 for a lollipop? What the fuck? That kind of shit.
Well, like I don't know that game. They're doing a sequel, aren't they?
Oh my gosh, I'm googling it.
Yeah. Like yeah, having not finished it, I don't know if I can speak at length about it. But anecdotally, I mean, like I know for the response that I heard to Deadly Premonition reminded me a lot of the response that I heard to Bayonetta, in which
Hmm.
it's there was once people people played it, they bought it, they played it, they're like, ha, budget title looks like shit. They played it, and
Yeah,
by the end of it, once they finished, I had more than a couple friends say, I'm not sure if they're kidding or not. And I think that's
yeah,
which resembles in a lot of ways the responses to a game like Bayonetta, in which people were looking at it and saying, I'm not sure if I'm meant to take this seriously or not. And it's not a matter of like whether actually it's less about am I meant to take this seriously and more about is this a game that was developed in earnest? Are they being ironic? Is this tongue in cheek? I mean, is there a sly wink and a nod attached to this?
yeah,
And I think that depending on what you choose to believe, because I've heard evidence to in both directions, at least about Bayonetta, that the guys at Platinum like really thought they were creating a really strong female protagonist that was really like though she's sexy and she's
hmm.
in power, and she's a badass, and that makes it awesome. This is the greatest. And then I've heard evidence to the effect that it's more about like, well, no, I mean, this is clearly an over the top. She's got giant tendrils of hair shooting out of her vagina to take out guys. I mean, and
Yeah,
she's fighting these massive religious symbols that have weird baby face masks and shit. Like it's these cherub faces. Like it's of course it's a joke, but I don't really know where that line is, so I figure that it's more or less my choice. I love Bayonetta because it's over the top. So
yeah,
I choose to believe. And if this is me invoking some cognitive dissonance, I'm okay with that because that means I can still play Bayonetta with at least without feeling like a shit, for playing and enjoying it.
yeah.
Um,
So people look at you and you can just look back and be like, that's right. I'm playing
yeah,
Bayonetta.
yeah. Now that being said, I have no patience for people who enjoy things ironically. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Yeah. Like
maybe I'm the one who enjoys things. I can't think of anything that I enjoy ironically. Um,
well, when people say like, "Oh, man, I love Deadly Premonition," it's so bad, it's good. I just love we get together, we play through it. No, that's not necessarily true. There's something about it that appeals to you. I
yeah,
think that I don't, if it's funny, if you find it to be funny, it don't find it funny because you think it's awful. I mean, there are plenty of things that are really bad, and as a result, they're funny and all that. But I mean, when people
yeah,
declare that, it's like it seems non-committal to me. It's like, no, I like it ironically. No, I like Deadly Premonition ironically. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say this is a game that I actually enjoyed, even though I got enjoyment out of that experience for whatever reason. If
yeah,
you enjoy something, you enjoy it, fucking period. Just say you enjoy it, own it, stop being a pussy and just say, I like this thing, as opposed to, I like this ironically, or I listen to this ironically, or,
yeah.
guilty pleasure is another fucking thing. Just call it a pleasure. Just shut up and just tell me that you like something.
I I consume a lot of media that is really shitty just because I feel like if I am going to have an opinion on something, I should probably watch it. So I watch a lot of bad movies and stuff like that.
Hmm.
But I don't tend to follow the same thing with games. If I hear like Resident Evil 6, I probably will never touch, even though a lot of people are like, no, it's still pretty good. I'm like, nah, it's I played the demo. I'm not going to do it. But with movies, it's like, oh, I heard it's shit, but I have to watch it now because I need to know if it's shit. And I don't know if there's something weird about the medium that I just don't want to take the time and interact with it because then I'll feel betrayed by myself or
No,
something.
it's a. I was actually thinking about that the other day, about Resident Evil 6, because I think the difference is the time investment, right? I mean, like
Yeah,
it's I can't play I can't play 90 minutes of a game, and if it's a 10-hour game or something, and really say that I know everything I need to know about that game.
yeah.
So in the case of Resident Evil 6, what happened to me was I pre-ordered the game months and months ago. The reviews came out, everybody was shitting on it, and I'm like, you know what? This probably isn't just this isn't a stick it to the man thing. This is a bad game.
Yeah.
But by that time, my pre-order had already shipped. So
Oh,
yeah. So well, which wasn't a big deal. I was like, well,
yeah.
fuck it. I'll just
Yeah.
return it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to reward Capcom for putting out a crap game if it actually was crap. I don't think
Yeah.
that's acceptable. I don't think it's a good. If it was a genuine 3.0, or 4.0, if those are genuine scores and not just like, yeah, let's shit on Resident Evil and be counterculture and yeah, it's gonna be awesome. Like, I heard from many people that I respect, reviewers that I respect, people that I know, that it was a really, really terrible game. Like, and I was like, well, like Resident Evil 5 terrible? They're like, no, dude. Like, this makes Resident Evil look like Resident Evil 4. This makes Resident Evil 5 look like Resident Evil 4.
Resident Evil 5
And
wasn't that bad. It was pretty fun. I enjoyed
yeah,
it.
but that's the thing, is that Resident Evil 5, it was fine. I liked it.
Yeah.
It had some AI problems or whatever, but compared against Resident Evil 4, which is probably one of the best games of the last decade,
Yeah. Yeah.
in the top five.
Hmm.
Compared against that, it had a pedigree that it couldn't possibly live up to. Um, but here's the thing about 6. I had intended to return it, put in my return on Amazon, and but the day before it arrived, Kotaku had put up a post about the Agent Hunt mode in Resident Evil 6. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Agent Hunt is basically the invasion system from Dark Souls. So the idea is,
Oh, cool.
once you finish the campaign in Resident Evil 6, you can do Agent Hunt mode. You start off as a zombie dog, and you invade player characters, like other players on Xbox Live. You invade their games as a playable zombie dog. You can when you start a game on Xbox Live, you can choose to either
Yeah.
enable or disallow people invading your game. But that's just, and I've never actually seen it. So, and I played some of the campaign. I don't know if it ever happened to me. I kind of hope that I would
You would
have.
know
Yeah, I would like to see that somebody invades my game, and I would like to know if I killed them,
if
or
they were
whatever.
glowing or
But
something. Yeah.
yeah. But I don't know the details on that or how that works. But it's because when I heard about that mode, and I'm like, that's something that I want more of. As you know, I go on at length about Dark Souls about every 30 or 35 minutes or so, and
Yeah. So do I now.
yeah, and the invasion system, I think, is one of the most important things about Dark Souls. I think that
Yeah.
that's the perfect way to blend. I mean, I guess what you could call competitive multiplayer with a single player campaign. I think it's one of the most innovative and brilliant things to come out of video games this generation, and I want to see more of it. So when I read about that, I just said, shit, like I'm
God
now
damn it.
I have to play it. And the worst part was I have to play through the whole campaign.
Well, did you play Raccoon City at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did a review for that, and the only thing that I actually liked about that game was the multiplayer mode where at the end you got in the helicopter and there's only enough spots for 4 people and there's 5 people playing. And then
Mhm.
one person's like, well, fuck, I guess I'm gonna die. And I thought like that was, with good amount of friends and not some random people, that was actually really cool. And they should add that into more zombie games like Left 4 Dead.
So how does that work? Like, if is everybody booking it for the helicopter, and if all
Yeah.
5 people make it, does one person have to stay behind? Do you fight or something, or how does it work?
It was like you get to the end and it says the helicopter's here, everyone runs, and then whoever doesn't get in the helicopter, yeah, stays and fight while the helicopter flies away on everybody else's screen, and then they just get killed by masses of zombies because they're always in situations where there's just an infinite amount of zombies and crazy shit happening. As shitty as that game was, I thought that was a pretty interesting take on multiplayer modes because a lot of multiplayer modes is like I'm gonna shoot you, you're gonna shoot me.
No, I agree. I
And
agree.
shot.
I think it'd be more interesting if there was some sort of, like, if there was a consequence for that. Like,
Oh yeah,
if we had to make a decision as to who is best to, like, if we had to choose, if there were five of us and we had to say like, okay, we have to pick the one person who's not going to stick around, who can defend the helicopter best while we're taking off or whatever, that would be interesting because then there would be this, especially if it had like an impact on your score or something like that, because there would be this debate or there would be a kind of push and pull between the players, as they're making this decision, looking at like, well, who has this item equipped, who has these many, these health packs or whatever. Like if they actually had to make a choice and if it was something about balancing the, your aims as an individual, like whatever those might be, score or whatever drops or whatever, with the needs of the group, which is the only way that we win is if the group actually gets away. So do you want to, if you're the best person, if you're the person best equipped to handle that situation, do you volunteer or do you hope somebody else does? Or that's where I think that shit can get interesting. It's a shame they put
Botch
that at
it?
the end. Well, no, yeah. I mean, it's a shame. It's a shame I never tried it. Like, it's a
Yeah.
shame I was never compelled to try it.
Well,
Um,
that kind
oh,
of stuff
yeah.
happened organically in Left 4 Dead. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, put that in Left 4 Dead. But it just happened normally. Like when you're playing in the finales, and it's like there's the helicopter on top of No Mercy, and you're getting smoked, and guys are like, hey, I'm gonna come get you before we get in the helicopter. You're like, no, just fucking go, leave, leave.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
there's no gameplay implications besides the fact that at the end of the credits it says you died or whatever. But
Yeah, yeah.
it
Well,
was still like win,
yeah,
please.
it's risk reward. I mean, that's what it
Yeah,
is. It's your. I mean, if you're down and it's time to go, and you have to make the choice between, well, especially in versus multiplayer, like when you're in Left 4 Dead, when you have to make the decision between like, and it's a numerical decision. You have to be utilitarian about it. You have to think, okay, well, I might. I'll die and whatever, and we'll lose those points. But is it worth the risk trying to get me up to get those points? Like you actually have to make
yeah,
really quick mathematical calculations if it's a close game, which I think is kind of interesting. It's also kind of cold and steely and mechanical and not
not
uh,
human. Yeah,
not human. It's more it's gamified and
points.
all that. But yeah, but like it's still interesting. I still think that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, so to bring it back to your original question, the I think that about movies and time investment and that kind of thing. So I tried. I I have to beat the campaign of Resident Evil 6 before I can try Agent Hunt.
Oh,
Um,
okay. I thought
I think
you had to do it morally because you just have to.
no. It's just the mode will not unlock. So
Okay.
so I'm like I sat down. I'm like, well, I'll play this. I'll give it a fair shake. Maybe it is all bullshit. Popped it in. Played a little bit of it. Enjoyed a couple minutes, and then it all just went to hell. And I can't do it. Like I just don't care about it at all. I
Yeah.
want to see agent mode. I want to play it because as as a game developer, that's something that I want to do more of. I want to see more of that in games in general. I would love to see it in games that I'm working on. So I want to see how it works outside of the context of Dark Souls. It works great in Dark Souls because um, you know PvE and PvP systems are usually segregated from one another because they're completely different challenge dynamics involved with
Yeah.
those. When you're playing, it's the difference between playing Counter Strike and playing Ikaruga. Both of them are really, really hard, really hard. But
Yeah.
they're hard in different ways.
Hmm.
Ikaruga is a rigid system that will never change. Yeah, Ikaruga never changes. It is always hard the way it is the first time you play it and the last time you play it. It's
Yeah.
always the same. Counter Strike is hard, but the people that make it difficult are a rotating roster of 12-year-olds handing you your ass and calling you fag. But it's still a difficult thing.
Or
It's still
playing music through their mics.
exactly right. It's still difficult, but that difficulty is dynamic. It's always changing. It's changing depending on who you're actually playing against and who you're playing with and what the circumstances are. Those systems are always in flux, are always changing.
Yeah.
What makes Dark Souls interesting is that it's a combination of those two systems in a way that kind of makes sense because the game is already so difficult. And it's tied into the game in a risk reward sense where the only way that you get invaded is if you go human so you can summon help to help you get through.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're basically asking the game, let me make the single player experience easier. And if you do that for me, I will be willing to trade you the risk that somebody will be able to come into my game and make my single player experience harder. I love that, and
Yeah.
I want to see that in more places. I think that it was cool of them to make that part of Resident Evil 6. I wish they made it into a game that I would actually play enough to get to that pit. But like the reason I was so desperate to see it is because I need to see that system outside of the context of Dark Souls.
Well,
I need to see it in a game that's not known for being absolutely rigid in its difficulty and punishing and punitive and vicious. I need to see it in a game that isn't like that, and I just can't fucking do it because I can't play that goddamn game.
well, have you played any DayZ at all? Because I haven't, but
Yeah,
from all the stuff I've seen of it, I spend hours watching YouTube videos because I don't have a computer that can run it yet, and it's like it looks like that to me. Like you can have best of both worlds, but sometimes it's chosen for you with the PvP and the PvE
mm,
stuff because there's the zombies there, but then there's also people running around being assholes or being good people, and that's to go way back to the whole non-linear gameplay thing. That's something that I think is like I'm more interested in now more than anything. Like I look at the games coming out even next month, and I'm like, don't care. Just want to play games like Minecraft or DayZ and stuff, and I want to be able to have my own experience. And I don't really care what you're trying to tell me anymore. It seems, and it's indicative of the games industry to me. Like we're in this weird in between point where we were in the 80s with the Atari, the NES, and all that, and these really crazy things happening, and now we're in this weird place where everything's the same, and it's I don't know, it's weird. I feel like
how do
the
you
next
mean everything's the same? Could you expand on that?
I feel like when I pop in a disc into a game, there's a 90% chance that it's I'm gonna see a lot of the same stuff I've already seen in another game. Like
Sure.
if I buy Halo 4 and I buy Assassin's Creed 3, yes, they're gonna be different, but they're still gonna feel like this weird linear thing that I just don't care about.
Hmm.
As opposed to
And
like
so,
when I played like 30 Flights of Loving, it blew my fucking mind because I'm like, what is this? This is the best thing ever. I've never seen this before. And
oh,
in
what's interesting about that is that you couldn't get more linear than 30 Flights of Loving.
That's true. That's true.
Um,
But
in fact, I would say that that 30 Flights of Loving is probably the single most linear narrative that I've ever played. And mostly
mhm.
because the number of uh, your verbs are limited in that game. You can interact with things, but only in a single way, and in a very specific kind of context. It's a guided experience the whole way. It's an authored experience. I agree that it felt different from anything that we've seen in a long time. I think the reason for that is the ways in which it takes a lot of risks, in terms of the way in which it uh, illustrates that narrative to players in a way that leaves that narrative very ambiguous to a lot of players. I think that's an acceptable risk. And Brendan Chung, when we had him on Keeping It Real, like said the same thing. It was like
Yeah.
that this was he effectively said this is a story that he wanted to tell.
Yeah.
And this was the way in which he was going to do it, and that he knew going into that there were going to be some people that wouldn't necessarily get it. And you look at a game like Braid, where guys like Jonathan Blow are saying that, well, nobody's hit the nail on the head in terms of what it's about yet.
I have
I
no idea, but I still love it. I'm just like,
I
what? What
Yeah,
just
yeah. Well, I
happened?
mean, I love the game. I'm not a huge fan of the story because
Yeah.
because I think that if there are so many possible interpretations of your story, I think you failed at least a little bit as a storyteller, because you've given people a lot of things to play with and roll around in their mind and come up with their own interpretations and all that. But I don't know, as a result of playing his game and experiencing his story, I don't understand Jonathan Blow any better, because there wasn't. In my head, there wasn't really a cohesive narrative that I could actually say, okay, this is what he
Yeah.
was trying to tell me. I can guess as to what he was trying to tell me, but I can't really know. It's not his responsibility as an author to tell me that.
Yeah.
There is no obligation. He is under no obligation to tell me what his story means or what he feels about a thing or whatever. That is not his responsibility. Just the same, I have the right to react to that story based on what my expectations are and what I would like to get out of that. And I would have liked to get more of his perspective, at least more concretely defined. Um, I think that the ambiguity of a game like 30 Flights of Loving
Hmm.
was offset by the fact that there was a clear, cohesive narrative there. As for the connective tissue is where that game starts to get a little fuzzy, and that's what really makes it exhilarating, because you have solid ground to stand on in terms of piecing together that story, and there is room for interpretation, there is room for
Yeah.
doubt, and for you to think like, oh, I wonder if it was this or if it was this, but on the whole, like there's emotional resonance there that you can't escape. There are moments in that are unambiguous. There are scenes in that game that are striking, and
Like the wedding scene pops
yeah,
out in my mind immediately.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which
So like so I think I think if anything, that's why that game struck you differently than any other game you've played, is because it took those risks, and it didn't coddle you, and it didn't saddle the experience with anything unnecessary. Everything. What's beautiful about 30 Flights of Loving is that there is no vestigial element of that game. There's nothing that it could lose. There's nothing that feels unnecessary.
yeah.
Shit. Even the what the hell is the principle? The Bernoulli's principle at the
Yeah,
end.
at the end.
Even that was just it. I can't. I can't.
Wasn't it just explaining how they flew the plane, really?
Yeah. It's explaining Bernoulli's the principle of lift. It explains how airplanes
Yeah.
work. And for some reason, I'm still trying to figure out why it feels like a part of the experience, and I'm not sure why. It feels like a part of the story, even though it is like within the diegesis of that story, it's not in the story. That is a completely set apart. It's part of the credits, basically.
Yeah, you're walking through the museum party-ish thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But something about it feels part and parcel to that story to me. I'm still trying to pin down why.
It felt like a real resolution, like you could calm down after this crazy stuff, all these cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, now here's something I can look at, and here I can put my brain to what they're telling me and be like, okay, well, here's Bernoulli's principle, lift, here's the thing I can click on. And it was this weird switching from what it was before. So I guess maybe I don't know. Brandon's too smart for me, so maybe he was just playing like, okay, let's dial it down and let's make you think back. So like maybe if he's bringing, I can't, I can't speak.
It was a moment. No. It was a moment to reflect.
Yeah,
It's a moment to digest.
Yeah, you're like, okay, well, there's I got on the plane and now lift, and now I'm not in the plane. Now I'm being shot or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So. And I've never had that with a game where the game's like, okay, here I'm going to trick you into thinking about what you just did.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
well, maybe BioShock a little bit, but I bring everything back to BioShock because I love that fucking game.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I going back to your earlier point, I agree that that I'm similarly crestfallen with a lot of AAA development, a lot of the big budget releases. I'm a lot of that disappointment and disillusionment comes from the fact that the middle ground, the middle class of development, if you will, is dying out. And that I think that I worry that in another 5 years it's going to be unless things change rapidly with the advent of the new consoles. I think it's going to be indie devs and Activision scale development and not much in between. But I think that the homogenization of the content that we're seeing in AAA development is a result of that. I think that we've that we as an industry have figured out the way to get people to pre-order, the way to get we have a general idea of how to get people to throw their 60 bones at a title, and we don't deviate too much from that course. With some exception, but well, let me put it this way, there will always be 20 or 30 Call of Duties to every one Spec Ops, and I think that's just going to be the way it is until some massive sea change happens, either with the ways in which we can think about how games are produced, how teams are composed, how games are financed, all of that. And there's a lot of changes happening right now, but not to the scale that's going to affect guys like Ubisoft and Activision.
Well,
go ahead.
Do you think that's so I'm going to put some blame on myself with this. Do you think that's part of the problem with how games, in air quotes, journalism works and how games media is working? Because a lot of the games that are covered are just, here's Call of Duty, here's the review for Halo, here's the review for Madden, and here's what we're doing with it, and here, let's just talk about it. But no one's really bringing up the conversations on how we can make this stuff better or how we can make it more interesting. And
I disagree. I think that I agree insofar as that I think media is a big part of the problem. Totally. I think that it's a problem that that the industry that is supposed to the industry that games journalism is supposed to report on is as closely tied to those reporters as they are to their publishing partners, their distribution partners, all of that. I think that games journalism and game development are too close. I think that and I think it's a self I think that that engine kind of powers itself a little bit. I think that uh, Call of Duty content, on Kotaku gets a lot of clicks because a lot of people want Call of Duty. So Kotaku covers Call of Duty, even though they know that if you want to see a Call of Duty trailer, God knows there's going to be 30 or 40 places that it's going to be put right in front of you. Between
everyone
now,
on YouTube is going to
everyone on YouTube, the Xbox dashboard, it's going to be hard to escape Call of Duty before Call of Duty comes out. It's hard to escape.
It's no escape.
What's that?
There is no escape.
Yeah, there is no escape.
Yeah.
But I disagree that I don't think it's an industry-wide problem. I think there are outfits that are doing a lot of really good work. Rock Paper Shotgun, I think, is probably the most important gaming website currently operating.
Kotaku, did you say? Sorry, I didn't hear you for a second. What?
Oh no! I said Rock Paper Shotgun.
Oh yeah, I agree.
As
Kotaku, I was confused.
Oh no!
Not
Rock,
to
Paper,
shit
Shotgun.
on anyone, but
oh yeah, no. I mean, I'm not saying again. I was a journalist. I mean, I wasn't a good one, and I wasn't one for very long.
No, you're
no. Really, I was shit. I'm shit at games journalism. I'm shit at it. I wrote features. I wrote reviews, and usually those reviews became features because I was obsessed with. I hated scoring games. I hated.
Oh yeah.
I hated being. I hated people asking me whether or not they should buy something. I love talking to people. I love talking to people about games and game design. I love exploring what games are in a cultural context. I like all of that. I love that part of it. I mean, that's where Anthony and I both came from. We both came from a feature writing background. When I went to Shack News, it was almost all news, and I hated it. I hated it. I was terrible at it.
For Shack News?
Yeah, I worked for Shack News for a year.
Oh, wow.
I left Destructoid in March of 2008, and I had been I worked from I think it was like January of 2008 to about August of that same year for Shack News. So it was a little less than a year. And Shack News, all amazing guys, and almost all of whom now work at Gearbox, which is funny. But I worked with let's see, like Chris Failer, he's the community manager over there.
Yeah.
Martin Goldstein, who was our dev on Shack News, and who had been working with the owner of Shack News, Steve Gibson, since the site was born, since they made the site back in like 99 or 98 or something like that. They're both at Gearbox. Steve Gibson is their director of marketing. It's Nick Brecken, who I worked with there, he's at Bethesda now. I worked with Chris Remo, who now does the Idle Thumbs podcast and is now working at Double Fine. By the way, if anybody listening to this, or if you, Grayson, haven't listened to Idle Thumbs, you really should. It's a really, really good,
downloading it,
really good podcast. Really good.
I don't have to keep listening to Podtoid anymore.
No, seriously, I think so. No, really. I mean, excuse me. Whenever I listen to Idle Thumbs, I feel bad for everything I ever did as part of Podtoid. Like, I feel like I wasn't doing enough. I feel like I wasn't bringing enough to the table. Like I wasn't trying hard enough to get people to think about games the way that I think about games, the way that Remo and Sean Bannerman and all those guys, or excuse me, Jake Rockin. I mix them up because they both work at Telltale, but whatever. The way that the guys on Idle Thumbs think about games, to talk about games, I wasn't trying to push that discourse. And part of it was because I worked for Destructoid, where our fucking, slogan was also Cox, right? I mean,
yeah.
The only reason the only reason I was able to publish anything on Destructoid is because I took myself even less seriously than Destructoid takes itself. But I love Destructoid, and I love the people that, I worked with when I was there. I want to see that. I want to see the level of discourse raised. I want to see people thinking more about game development and the consumption of the media that they buy in games. I want that to be a more open discourse. I want people to really think about how they vote with their wallets and the people that they support. I want people to understand that it's not I want it to become more like, the relationship between, you know, comic book fans and their creators, and rather than Hollywood, and its audiences. I think
Yeah.
and I think that that's an issue I think I have with game blogs nowadays is that um, it makes that relationship much more consumeristic than I think it should be. I mean, there's always going to be an element of consumerism to it. I mean, it's a market, it's a business, it's an industry. But I I think that we all need to take it a little more seriously in some respects and way less seriously in others. That's a much longer conversation. But I mean, everyone in that industry, the games journalism industry, they're hardworking people. They put up with a lot of bullshit. They dish out a lot of bullshit. But
Can't wait.
what's that?
Can't wait.
But um, but that being said, like I don't know. I've disconnected from a lot of it
Hmm.
because the discourse is at times really just seems shitty to me.